I am much more bullish on the defense than I was this summer. I feel better about the defense.
Tell me why, Mike.
All right. A big reason why is I love the defensive backs. Shout out Traden Stukes, your guy Traden Stukes, by the way, as well. Wink, 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 nod, nod, nod. But I think when you've got 6 defensive backs that can all play, especially Owen Goss, who has been, I'm going to keep giving Spears credit on that, the Martell Irby, I think you have so much possibilities there. You also, with Genesis Smith, and you noticed it immediately when we were talking with Lamont, just how big he is. We're going to start there, and then we're going to work our way inward. Saul, when you've got a defensive backfield loaded with talent, it makes things easier to be able to kind of MacGyver around.
It does, especially when you have guys the size of a guy like Genesis Smith. Again, seeing him in person, you just feel like he could hit and take down anybody, and that's, you kind of get that feeling across the board. Traden Stukes is no different. Very much a good technical guy, but also aggressive when it needs to be done. Good technique, understands how to play in zone and in man. Coverage skills are there. Like, this secondary is going to be very, very, very good for sure.
And they're hitters, too. I mean, Gunnar Maldonado, my bad, Gunnar Maldonado, obviously in there. Dalton Johnson, kind of the quarterback of all those players. We've obviously talked about Tacario Davis, Marquise Groves, Killebrew, probably going to be on the outside. You got 6 dudes. And if you got 6 guys, you can do a lot of different things. So then let's move inward, not outward. Then you got Jacob Manu, who's obviously going to be an All-American type player. He's instinctive. You know what's amazing about Manu as well? And Akina was talking about this. People forget. He had 6 sacks last year. For being for not being a super big guy, he was second on the team in sacks. And they asked Akina about that. And he said the thing that Manu can do and why he's always going to be a good pass rusher is he said he can get skinny. He said he's got the ability to be able to get skinny when I bring him. And if I bring him, he's probably going to get to the ball carrier or the quarterback. I feel very good about that as well, Saul. When you combine the DBs and the linebackers, I don't really have a ton of concerns, to be honest with you.
Well, you should, because tell me who you can rely on outside of Jacob Manu from the linebacker position.
All right.
Like surefire, will not miss.
I can't do it. Can't do it. I agree with you. But
that's my concern.
I also agreed. But I also think you're going to see so much of the dollar package where you're going to have so many. You're going to have I don't think that Akina can keep those safeties off the field.
I get that, but here we're gonna find out in week 3. And I'm not trying to say that we're going to lose to Kansas State by any stretch of the imagination, because I think for everything that Kansas State is good at on defense, we are equally, if not better, on offense, to combat them. But the problem is like, if you've ever watched a team like K-State, who's got this funky way about them sometimes with their quarterbacks and their quarterback runs, and sometimes they'll go 3 tight ends with a fullback, and then they'll just do a quarterback run up the middle just to get a couple yards, and they just continue to pound you and pound you and pound you, and with the dynamic versatility of obviously Avery Johnson, that's going to be problematic, especially when you got a team that can run the ball. Listen, they just got that transfer from Colorado, who's originally was going to go, Dylan Edwards, who originally was thought to go to K-State, ended up going to Colorado. Now he's back. They also, I forget their backup running backs game. They got a really good 1-2 punch at running back.
Yeah,
fantastic. And so when I'm looking at our front 7, or let's just say for this exercise, our front 5. Okay, let's say we go 3 or 4 down linemen, and we have 1 or 2 linebackers in the mix. 5 defense, maybe you go 4-2-5, right? And you've got to be very, very calculated in how you use your safeties and the guys that are going to be down in the box, because you don't want to find yourself in a position where you're just getting overrun because of the size of some of these Big 12 teams. So you've got to be very careful with this.
See, my bigger concern is the depth on the D line. I think that was something last year that the Arizona generally doesn't have the kind of depth you did on the D line. And last year you had Tyler Manoa, you had Tia Savea, you had Big Bill Norton, you had a ton of guys who were all 315 pounds. So they didn't get worn down in the fourth quarter. How many times did you see Arizona football last year where the other team was left standing and Arizona wasn't left standing and Arizona was left standing? That to me is my biggest concern, because Arizona really didn't have a linebacker next to Manu last year either. It was basically Martell Irby, a safety that they just put in the box. So that worries me. What worries me though is, what do you have after that 4? I love Trey Smith. from your neck of the woods up there. I think he's going to be fantastic. I love the front four, the starting. But after that, you got a lot of 270-pound tackles. That worries me a little bit, Saul.
Who's going to step up? Who's going to surprise? Listen, we're not talking about some guys that could potentially just all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, here we go. You got one or two guys to step up at that defensive line or even edge rusher position, and then that changes the game as well. And that's what you really, really need that to happen, to be honest with you. Because I will say this, my biggest concern has always been the defensive line and the depth. And the linebackers, if you want to throw them all in the same kind of group, and the difference between the offensive line and the defensive line worry. And I would say, to a certain degree, I feel kind of the same way about both. The difference is, offensively, I can control the scheme. I can have some actions that are quick to where it doesn't put a lot of pressure on the offensive line from time to time. So it doesn't have to be as much a point of emphasis as long as everybody holds up at the point of attack. With the defensive line, yeah, I don't feel the same way, because you those are uncontrollables. You have no control over what the other team's going to do offensively. So how are they going to hold up over the course of the year? And that's not even taken into consideration if they have an injury. Then you're just really behind the eight ball. And so I'm a little concerned about the defensive line. That's the one Achilles heel, in my opinion, on this team, is the defensive line depth. It might rear its ugly head at some point.
And it's the edge. Let's keep it on the edge for a second. By the way, Doughboy96 has been reading Deuce Lane a lot recently. Deuce Lane, ex-4-star kid out of Oaks Christian. He has been very, very good in camp. He's going to be one of your backup edge rushers. We'll see, obviously, if that can translate into the games. That would be very, very nice. Listen, here's what you know. Trey Smith is, a lot of times I think you wonder, can a guy really translate their production from San Jose State to here? Trey Smith feels kind of like an NFL player. You talk with people around the program, they think he's going to be in the NFL in some capacity. What I like about defensive ends like him is he was very active last year, Saul. 75 tackles. If you're just a plotter that's just kind of a bull rusher, you're not getting 75 tackles. He got 6.5 sacks, got a lot of tackles for loss. They need numbers from him, because you got to remember, Taylor Upshaw last year, 8 sacks. You lost him. You lost Isaiah Ward. You lost Deuce Davis. Between Trey Smith and between Tai Uyunglele, I need 12 sacks from a starting defensive ends, period. At least 2 sacks.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Upshaw was good last year, but I don't even think Upshaw was like great. I don't think he was like over the top, just dominant, amazing, right? I thought that he had several good games, and then he kind of forgot he was out there from time to time as well. Like, right. So can these guys just be a little bit more consistent? I'll tell you this. If you give me 5 sacks from the edge, but you were consistently there in the backfield, you're consistently where you're supposed to be position-wise, I can live with the fact that you're not going to get as many sacks as maybe an Upshaw last year. But if the fall-off is too great, then that's what puts us in a bad position. And I don't think that that's what's going to happen. I think, I do trust in Duane Akina and Brett Brennan to put this together and really scheme this the best way possible based on the personnel that they have. I just know that they've been working tirelessly at it.
There's a lot of question marks too. Now, listen, I like Chuba May a lot. I think he's going to be the cultural leader of the team. The big Bill Norton was last year, 6'5", 350, but he was at UC Davis last year. Granted, he was all conference, but he was also at UC Davis. So you got to remember that. Isaiah Johnson, like him a lot as well, kid out of Chandler, but 6'2", 315 pounds, but he's been injured a lot during his career. You're good. You're really banking on those two guys really being able to, kind of fill the gap, plug the holes, because, after that, you got Kevon Darton, you got Bear Anderson, but those guys are also 275 pounds, a little bit different.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. Just a little bit.
Just a little bit different. But either way, here's what I need. I believe that Arizona is going to have the best offense in the Big 12. With it comes to defense, here's where I think if Arizona can have a top 4 defense in the Big 12, we are going to the college football playoffs. Saul Bookman, book it, my man. Get it?
I would say yes. However, I think it's far more likely that we finish if we're going to reach any of these. I would say just not being a homer, being objective as possible. I think if we just finish in the top 8 in defense, then we have a fighting shot.
Right.
But
my whole thing last year was don't suck. Just don't have the defense suck. How about that?
Basically, because I do think that this offense can be a top tier offense in the Big 12. I would be shocked if they didn't finish in the top 3 or 4 in the conference in terms of total offense based on the personnel that they have. But when you're shifting over and you're thinking about the whole as the greater good and the defense chipping in on that, that's where you get to a little bit of concern.